Welcome to the Sales Compensation Show, where we share the latest sales performance insights through in-depth discussion with experts. Season 3 of our show is your backstage pass to discovering how today's most successful sales and revenue ops teams support go-to-market strategy and improve sales performance. Plus, we'll explore what we can learn about incentives from different industries more broadly. Subscribe to hear how leaders are unlocking new growth, implementing the latest compensation trends, and their priorities for improving go-to-market performance. I'm your host, CEO of Form AI, Nabeil Alazzam. Kaleb, it's great to have you on the show. It's always great when we get to connect and chat, but super excited and thankful for having you come on and share your experience on the show.
Yeah, awesome. Thanks for having me, Nabeil.
I start, of course, the same way because we all started in a different path and ended up in this wonderful world of sales compensation. But I would love to learn how you got into this career.
Sure. Yeah. Like many people in this field, sales comp is certainly not something that when they ask you in kindergarten what you want to be when you grow up, you say, I want to work in sales comp. We all end up here by chance or by some other nuanced path. And that's certainly the case for me. Throughout my schooling, I had a kind of objective of going to law school. I studied economics and physics, and I had my dreams on like being a patent attorney, completely different from where I'm at today. But I always expected to take a gap year after college, get some experience, make some money, and then kind of head off into law school. But once I stepped into the corporate space, I kind of realized how much I love the pace, the challenge, and the problem solving. Law school kind of no longer felt like that stretch for me. But I actually started my career in HR. I ended up doing things like visa, leave administration, benefits, nothing really to do with sales or incentives or revenue operations. But the company that I worked for actually went through a pretty big split. And one of the new divisions posted a role for sales and incentive compensation team. I applied out of curiosity, got the offer, and then that decision completely changed the trajectory of my career. And so really early in my career, I actually had the privilege of working under an exceptionally brilliant leader who shaped how I think about incentives and systems today. And she really taught me a lot about the power of breaking down silos, how to think about translating strategy into behavior and build comp that creates clarity and fairness and trust. And together, we kind of built an entire compensation practice from the ground up. And it was really cool because this spin-off company, we had the opportunity to pull all of the good best practices from the company that we were at, 40 years of successful history, and could use that to kind of think about like, what does durability look like? How do we design something modern and scalable, cross-functional that helps us, accomplish what's new at this company? The company that we were at sold SaaS, consulting, marketing services. So we had a really lot of broad exposure to multiple different types of sales motions, operating models. We also got to see what good looks like in really good economic times and really poor economic downturns. And it's really kind of a unique perspective to be able to see what the learnings were from that and how we could take that forward. But as you do when you're kind of working across finance and HR, you wear many different hats. So I've done everything from performance management, RevOps, deal strategy pricing, technical administration, but sales comp is home. It kind of brings the best of all of those worlds together, and it really gives you such a unique perspective that I don't think that many other people in your company can say that they have. And all of that has kind of given me such a deep appreciation for how interconnected all these different centers of excellence are and how they support the success of the company. But I say like the one thing that throughout kind of my experience, a belief that I have that I think has only gotten stronger is that incentive comp, commission sales comp is becoming one of the most strategic roles in the business. And it's not just because we get to convert strategy into behavior. We've really kind of started to make that shift, moving away from just being those payroll processors. But we almost get to be the architects of behavior. And when you get that architecture right, the entire revenue engine around it becomes so much more predictable and clear. And I think the really cool part about that is that you get to the point of becoming that trusted advisor. You get to counsel good decision making. And at least for me, that's kind of one of the things that wakes me up in the morning and gets me excited to come to work, is that there's always a new problem to solve. And you get to be at the center of the strategy and the challenges that happen across the company and be a part of making it on the other side of that, which is really cool.
100%. I mean, yeah, like it's the number of departments and number of things within a business that need to come together to kind of curate that ideal incentive structure. I mean, everything from like product strategy, pricing, to the sales process and motion, to the customer support. It all needs to come together, and you have to have that connective tissue to design the ideal incentive structure. And so, yeah, I certainly agree with you. And by the way, definitely a first in terms of patent lawyer as an original kind of direction to go to sales comp. But
yeah,
I have to say, I think there is a lot of synergies there, right? Like law is definitely is for the detail oriented. So sales comp, right? The fine tuning of words and kind of the
Yeah.
the clauses you have to get right. I mean, it's kind of like
Yeah.
if there is a legal profession that would feed into
Yeah.
sales comp, it would be the IP side. So yeah.
Yeah, and you have to be very diplomatic in the way that you approach stuff, which is, I think, something people always underestimate about the work behind the scenes. It's not put a number on the page and pay people. It's there's so much work that it takes to get there. There's a lot of synergies between the two, I'd say.
Yeah, I would love to understand as you kind of dove in, what were some of the biggest surprises, learnings, and things that you had to kind of tackle very quickly?
Yeah. Probably one of the very first things that I was surprised at as I started to really get into this world is just how complex everything is under the hood. And I think especially when you think from a leadership perspective, when you look at very high level, there's an oversimplification. You've got a target and some type of rate, we pay this out. And then you start to boil it down. Getting to that spot is very complex. And it's complex for a very good reason. When you do sales comp right, you've considered all these different perspectives like we were talking about. We have product, we have pricing, we have what are we selling, how are we selling it. But for me, it's like one of the most surprising things is you get in and you see the complexity, but you just see how interconnected everything is. It's really good. Incentive comp is informed from such diverse perspectives that you put something in front of your sales org and everybody loves it. That's because you spent all the time and effort to rally all these different stakeholders, break down silos, and do a lot of work that you don't get credit for, but is very meaningful at the end of the day. And it was just really surprising to see like how in depth all of that work actually is that gets you to that point.
So, I mean, yeah, it's a complex data challenge, it's business logic, it's all these things that have to come together and
Yeah.
be perfect because it is comp at the end of the day and someone's livelihood. And you're not 99% right. You're 1% wrong, as I like to say, if you don't get it right. So yeah, would love to, to double click on that. I think on the converse side, you sometimes get these situations where you are having to navigate a dilemma where the comp plan is blamed for something that is not a comp plan issue, and would
Mhm.
love to get your perspective on it because obviously most sales comp problems are not necessarily a sales comp problem.
Yeah.
They're far deeper than that. So how have you encountered situations like that, and how have you dealt with it?
Yeah. I feel like in a lot of forms, this is what our daily job is there's a lot of problems to solve. And the comp plan is very convenient and easy to blame. It's the thing that drives the payout. It's what determines what your salespeople take and when they're paycheck. And it's quite convenient to use. Anytime there's something wrong, oh, comp plan is wrong, comp plan is broken. But what I say is probably most important when you encounter these scenarios is I think it's always important to acknowledge what you're hearing, whether the noise is coming across as feedback, if it's coming across as criticism. There's always going to be some semblance of truth in whatever that is. You may be hearing much more about a symptom of something than the root cause, but you then take that away and figure out what is this signal telling me and like what do we need to do with it. And I think it's important, especially if somebody is telling you, hey, I don't feel that I'm getting paid enough, acknowledge that concern and figure out where is that coming from. If you dive in and you figure out, hey, somebody thinks that they're not getting paid enough because they don't have territory to hit their target, root cause. Comp plan kind of materializes that symptom that you see. But we know that the comp plan can become such a lightning rod for every single pain point, whether people have challenges generating pipeline. We have really wacky territories. Targets are all out of sorts. The comp plan is the easiest thing that people can pinpoint. But like I said, like I try to approach this by separating what the symptom is and identify where it's coming from. So when they tell us that the comp plan is broken, start to ask, okay, what's the specific behavior or outcome that we're concerned about? And then you can start to run your way all the way back through to figure out what point in the process this is breaking down. And I think most of the time, what you find is that that issue happens much earlier in the process, whether it's some type of challenge with segmentation. We've got 10 sellers in this territory that can only support 5. So you've got uneven opportunity, unrealistic goals, or we've completely changed the sales motion. We've got a completely new way of approaching this product, 24-month sales cycle, and we have quarterly plans. Some type of disconnect here. And you have to really go through that very intentional exercise to help teams understand what thing upstream is going wrong. And I think that's kind of the biggest part of the comp plan is that the comp plan is always the very last part in this process. And as kind of sales comp professionals, you have to almost always upward manage everything else that is happening upstream, even if it's not exactly your job. We get the privilege of being able to work and see all those different things, but it comes back to similar things. Like if you're receiving poor data to pay on, payouts are going to be wrong. So you really have to focus on what's happening upstream.
It's been said on the show many times. It's like all rivers lead to sales comp, right? Data, segmentation, quota, territory.
Yeah.
And yeah, you really have to, kind of go back and diagnose where it is. And sometimes it does lead to a comp plan change, right? It's not necessarily that just because a problem is upstream doesn't mean, again, it flows downstream. You may have to, as a result, change the comp plan. But yeah, that diagnosis process is critical. And I think that's a good framework to take to any sort of, complaints that come in. I guess, like, how do you find that you overcome that quick assumption that it's the comp plan by other stakeholders of the business?
Yeah.
And how do you, figure out how to communicate it in a way where it's kind of diverting focus to that upstream process? And I'm curious.
The first exercise that I always like to go through is you hear a lot about like ask the 5 whys. Ask somebody why they think the comp plan is wrong. They give you a reason. You'd be like, why do you think that is? Why? Why? Drill in more for the person that's giving you that feedback to try to diagnose as much as possible what you can. So you almost become somewhat of that diagnostician when you think about how we figure out the work that we do. But you have to get down to that root cause. And it doesn't just come from hearing from one person that is providing this feedback or this critique. You have to talk to other people. Make sure you're talking to your sales leaders. You talk with your colleagues in RevOps. Understand what could possibly be going wrong that is causing this issue. So again, if you hear that kind of feedback that our reps aren't paid enough, starting place, understand why do we feel that that's the sentiment? What's happening? Okay, we see that reps are not hitting their targets. Why are they not hitting their targets? They don't have balanced territories. Why don't they have balanced territories? And you see that the more that you start to drill into what the specifics of those issues are, but most importantly, thinking about the behavior and the outcome that we're concerned about, the easier it is to understand exactly what's going wrong and then figuring out how to address it. And a lot of times you're going to find that the complexity or the challenge exists within a process, which is a very challenging thing to not just identify, but address. But when you start to ask those questions and be very intentional about identifying the true root cause, then you can figure out how to solve it. And it's not a guarantee you can always solve everything on the comp plan or that the comp plan is the thing that fixes. But you now have data that you can use and show is like, hey, here's the challenge that we're hearing. We're materializing, and we see that this materializes with a lot of reps being very unhappy with how they're being paid. We all agree, hey, we don't want our reps to be unhappy. We want them to be motivated, producing. We don't want them to leave either. So what do we do to work together and figure out how we tackle what that issue is?
Again, the stakeholder management and having those open lines of communication is so critical, because to actually action on this, you have to be that trusted advisor.
Mm-hmm.
Otherwise, it's very hard to get the attention, enough of an attention span of those senior leaders to be able to walk them through the logic of how you got there.
Yeah.
And the only way to do that is to already have built up the credibility and have that open line communication. So I guess I'm curious, like, how have you done that over your career as you've gone from just first entering to now leading, entire teams and functions? How have you done that, or if you found you've done that best to get that status as the trusted advisor?
I think it's the trusted advisor is such a great term to use, because I think what it really illustrates is that you've been able to elevate the work that we do to this center of excellence. And what's really great about that is that when you go and you work with your senior leaders, you're not just coming and saying, here's the problem, and that's it. You're coming with, here's the problem, this is what's causing it, and this is how we're proposing to move beyond. And it's really kind of demonstrating, especially when you're working with executive leaders, the cause and effect. We have this issue with territories where people don't have enough to hit their targets. So they are leaving the company because they're not getting paid. They're not hitting their targets. You walk them through what the path is. And so, if you start to notice that you haven't been able to identify that the root cause is that we have territory challenges, you can start by asking those why questions. So for example, if you figure out that your attainment against target is highly inconsistent and you see that it's happening in very specific markets or different segments, a leader may say, okay, well, hey, let's just pay people more to fix the problem, and then they'll sell more. And sure, surface level rate, that may help a little bit initially, but raising rates doesn't change the fact that you've got imbalanced opportunities. And so when you go to executives, you really have to help them see the misalignment in a very simple, factual way that helps to getting them to orient their perspective towards a little bit of long-term thinking. There's always going to be a bias at executive leadership to act quickly to solve a quick problem and put a fire out. And you have to be constantly defenders of the long-term. How do we fix the foundation of what's happening here? And usually getting buy-in also means that you have to demonstrate what the cost of not doing something would be. So if you don't put a permanent fix in place on the comp plan or targets or territories, are we going to have such high attrition rates that we can't hit our business targets anymore? Or if you have a challenge with segmentation or clarity in roles, are we going to end up paying more for the same outcomes and eroding the trust of the org because it doesn't come across that we've kind of got this well thought out plan? So you're thinking about the foundations and really demonstrating to them what the cost of inaction is really critical to not just get their attention and their buy-in. But I would say that, one of the most persuasive but probably most challenging messages that you have to help them see or guide them towards is that foundational work is not just necessarily slow, right? There's always I talk about that bias of senior leadership wanting to act very quickly to solve problems. And they're going to have that reaction of like, okay, well, fixing something at the core, the root cause is going to take a lot of time. And sure, it will take a lot of time, but we also have to demonstrate that cost of inaction. Do we want to fix this once and be done with it, or do we want to fix this every single quarter? And once leaders see that type of foundational work, it gives them a clearer narrative that they can then illustrate beyond their own, beyond to the rest of their team. And, I think there's also a lot to say that when it comes to the comp plan, there's a lot of value in stability. Constant comp plan changes drive a lot of chaos. When people have uncertainty in how they're earning, they're not going to perform the best that they can. So when you focus on solving the root causes, thinking about foundational things that you can do to fix the comp plan or to fix something else that's driving a challenge with the comp plan, the more that you can get to that point of having stability, having org that believes in the comp plan, and you really kind of shift that perspective to just solving that one problem that materializes to being able to say that we have a plan that actually supports the entire growth of the business. And it's not an easy thing to do, but it is certainly impactful when you start to think of the narrative. How do we think about what the cause and effect is? What does it mean if we don't choose to address this? What could happen? And really partnering with them to figure out what the best path forward is. I think that's the other kind of thing when you're working with the senior leadership is that there's a lot of fear that if you don't come to the table with the perfect answer, that there's not going to be buy-in. And I've often found that that's not typically the case. Your senior leadership wants to be engaged. They want to be part of the narrative of solving what the problem is. So come with a couple ideas and recommendations, but I also think it's important to ask, present them with the facts of like what we're trying to solve for. How would they address it? What are their ideas? And so you really start to build that partnership together with them to solve those challenges.
Yeah, 100%. And I feel like the longer term foundational changes are much more impactful. And I think there's an element of like, you think about the business has a longer term trajectory and where it's going. And if you don't align your sales comp strategy to that, you end up doing these wide swings from comp plan design to comp plan design cycle versus, yes, things are going to change, new things are going to come up, markets are going to evolve. But if your comp plan strategy, your foundation is aligned to the longer term strategy of the business, you find that you deviate, yes, but you deviate much closer to the original, and it gives your team much more confidence. And I think if you don't have those conversations and you don't push for that longer term, harder alignment, it's very easy to end up actually paying more over time.
Whether that's in commission or the cost of attrition. And I think that's the other thing that you also have to help when we talk about bringing all of these perspectives together in the sales comp. You're never just representing your own point of view or your perspective. You have to bring a very holistic view of what's happening. Your RevOps perspective, your HR perspective, blending it all together is, when we think about why most folks have jobs, they have a job to get paid. And all of the things that lead to that outcome involve all those different groups that you work with. So you can't just present a single-sided solution. This is how we fix the comp plan. This is the entire life cycle of our reps and how we support their success. And that's how you drive very meaningful change that hopefully over time is much more durable. And like you said, doesn't have such wide deviations from where you're at that it just feels like there's no stability or there's no predictability in how your reps are going to get paid. And that's probably the other thing too, is the predictability. If your reps know how they're going to get paid, they will perform. But if they don't know or it's too complex, you kind of get in this spot where you have a lot of inefficiency and the comp plan itself almost becomes meaningless, which you don't want to be in a spot to have that.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I mean, they're optimizing their business the way that they're using their time based off a comp plan. If it's changing, yeah, you just lose cycles. If you're making big changes. But to kind of shift to a bit more futuristic thinking, like what are the mistakes that you think companies are going to be making, 5 years from now, especially considering how much of a shift we're seeing in the go-to-market function with AI and uh,
Yeah.
even in the next 6 to 12 months, let alone 5 years. But I guess thinking forward 5 years, what do you think are going to be the biggest mistakes?
Especially with this age of AI and how AI is just ballooning in every different segment of the ways that we work and how we do our work. I always come back to something that I think is a foundational challenge today, and it's that there's typically an over reliance on the comp plan to fix unclear things somewhere else. So AI will be great at helping us accelerate and augment the ways that we work. And especially as AI becomes so much more powerful and accessible, the challenge of designing something that can be on paper absolutely perfect and hit everything that you want to without addressing kind of structural variability or foundations is where the mistakes are still going to happen. And if you don't kind of understand, I think even more in particular, how the performance of your org looks, that is going to be an area where, the perfect comp plan on paper will mean nothing if it can't execute well. And I think, again, we kind of focus on the comp plan and the visible levers. Leadership is always going to say, okay, well, let's just increase the rates, make accelerators more generable, come up with a bunch of different stiffs. And on the surface, all those things are going to work well if everything else about the way the org works also works really well. But I think, especially in the age of AI, the companies that are going to win are going to be the ones that really focus on that holistic perspective. And you start to look at, do we have gaps in segmentation? Are there the way that we have distributed our sales work? Does it make the most sense? Does it optimize for what we're trying to achieve? And I think where the companies are still going to struggle is those that just want to treat the comp plan as a motivational lever instead of kind of a reflection of how they want the org to work is, it's still going to be that critical challenge. So AI is going to be great in helping you think about like the best comp plan to put together. But if you don't remember to think holistically about the comp plan as an outcome and getting the rest of the things along that journey right, you're still going to have the same challenges you have today.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, the innovation that's happening with AI across every part of the org is just only increasing the volatility in all these upstream pieces,
Yeah.
right? Like the definition of the roles within a go-to-market are evolving because some things are just going to be better done by through AI or automation, and other things are going to be done faster or more augmented, and other things are actually going to need more human touch as businesses go to a competitive nature of like, hey, you might want more in person to kind of stand out against the competition. And all of a sudden now your roles are changing.
Mm-hmm.
If you don't factor that into your comp plan design, you can easily fall into the trap that you talked about earlier, which is,
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
end up trying to solve everything with the comp plan, which is not how it should
Yeah.
be.
And I think it's also important too that especially when AI is integrated into every part of our lives, now that we don't forget to think about the entire cycle of this, right? So the comp plan always sits at the output, the outcome, but you still want to make sure, how do we make sure that we have a seat at every part along the journey so that we can inform and guide how we're getting to that spot? Because again, it works the other way around. You can have the best planned strategy, but if the comp team is not involved from the majority of that cycle, and then they come and say, okay, hey, we've got this great go-to-market plan, it's going to work perfectly, but then you can't execute the comp for it, you kind of have the same challenge in reverse. So, I always especially encourage my team as well too, like think about the ways that AI doesn't replace the work that we do, but think about how it augments how we do that work, the speed at which we can do it, right? We're kind of not in a place where AI can fully do the job of a sales comp team. I think it's kind of complex, but you have to think about using it in a way that really does help accelerate how you do the work that you do. Whether you're trying to get some research together or think creatively about how to approach a specific challenge that you're trying to get around. But again, I think we talk about this a lot. That even a mathematically perfect plan will fail if everything else that goes into it doesn't work at all.
Yeah, 100%. 100%. So to double click on, the concept of disrupting myths or kind of calling things out. So we have, a segment in the show that we run where it's, debunking common sales performance myths and misconceptions that we hear day to day. So I'm curious, what's that myth or misconception that is relevant for you?
I think one of the ones that I've probably seen the most, and I probably say out of my career, spent half of the time debunking, is that you can design a fair and effective comp plan without addressing the underlying performance variability. And what I mean by that is that, you can design a plan that you feel like mathematically, like I talked about, hits all of the right points. But if the underlying way that your org operates is that you have a really high deviation in performance and your performance relies on a small number of exceptionally high performing reps, it doesn't matter how well the comp plan works, you're going to have challenges when you go to execute and roll it out. And this is where, especially when you think about the age of AI and how things can help you. I think a lot of companies love to design plans in a vacuum, and they'll model costs in based on a hypothetical average rep. And I think that's also the narrative that you see when you look at the leadership level, that like average performance looks like this. We're hitting our business targets. That's really all that matters until something breaks. And a lot of what I spend my time doing is really trying to orient our leadership team from thinking about really three different perspectives when it comes to thinking about performance. Average performance is important. It tells you kind of on average, how is the org doing? You're going to look at your median performance, help you understand, do you have anything that's like wildly swinging what your average is? But there's always this third measure, standard deviation, that I love to introduce. And I think people shy away from bringing a little bit of the statistical nature to the work that we do and the narrative that we build because it's a little bit jargony. But one of the things that I found is very helpful when talking with leadership is showing them a perspective of triangulating those three different measures and helping them better understand performance variability. Because at the leadership level, we know that we constantly are exceeding our new business targets and our average performance is 90%. Oftentimes, that's where their information and analytics stop. And it's not until you dive in deeper and you say, okay, yes, that is how average reps are performing. But it's not until you look down and you can see that, oh, actually, we have an incredibly high standard deviation, which from their perspective means we have a very small number of high performing individuals carrying the entire org. That's not sustainable. So as soon as one of those people leave or they get sick or they stop producing as much, all of a sudden, this like really beautiful cushion that you see on paper at the top line no longer exists.
Yeah. And the fact that it might be a symptom of a much bigger problem, which is you actually have top performing reps that could be as good, but they're not given the right territory or the right targets to actually shine and they end up leaving. And so, yeah, I think more analytics and nerding out on the statistics behind sales comp only leads to better insights. Again, it's not going to solve all the problems to your point earlier. You have to get the root cause, but it at least kind of points you in the direction of some of those things that can be better addressed.
Especially when you're working with executives, you can't just put a huge data sheet together and expect them to make sense of it. Yeah. You almost have to sell that to them. You have to build the narrative and what that means, but not just what it means, why they should care about it. Why should my CRO care that we have such a high deviation of performance? Because all of a sudden we have one not so great quarter and everybody's freaking out. Oh my gosh, what's happening? And you help to pinpoint, this is why this is happening. It's not a new issue, right? You see these little cracks along the way. Yeah. And you really help bring light to data and perspective that they're not going to often get. And I think that's also the power of the world that we work in is that, many other companies, they have a lot of teams dedicated to looking at your sales and your top of funnel data. And a lot of that often happens very much in aggregate. But when you break it down at the sales comp perspective to the individual rep, the people that actually produce those outcomes, you bring a whole new view and perspective to what's actually happening. And I think that this is so important to make sure that you accurately represent that to your leadership teams to help make sure that they are also making the most informed decisions that they can, and that you're highlighting things that they may not have seen from the other data and analytics that they're getting.
I mean, again, all of this is comes from kind of years of experience across many different companies in this space. And so I'm curious if there's, specific career or, real life example where it's been extreme, either through a positive or a mistake or kind of an issue that you had to overcome that really kind of cemented some of this for you in terms of the sales planning best practices that we're talking about.
Probably about 7 or 8 years ago, a company that I was previously at acquired another much smaller company. And I was quite shocked when we got copies of their comp plans. And guess how many pages they were?
1, 2?
It was 15 pages long.
Okay. Wow. Yeah.
In those 15 pages,
it should be one. You should be able to read it in one. But I'm maybe 2. Yeah.
In those 15 pages, there was not a single chart or table or anything that talked about payout rates. It was all written in just words. And I was quite shocked that when I started to interview their sales team, I'm like, how do you understand that you get paid? They're like, well, we don't really know. I was like, oh, interesting. And the more that we started to dive in, we discovered that the team not only didn't understand how they got paid, just kind of trusted the system, but they were kind of also operating on a model where they also didn't have any targets or objectives. And so a company that was very well tenured that had sales territories and targets, it was quite a shock to the system for them to integrate into a culture that was very well performance managed and had a lot of clarity around it. So you think that a lot of times that you have a comp plan that is very clear. It's like, hey, here's your target. Here's how much you earn if you do this and this, like very basic. For them, it was like a complete shock. It's like, there's expectations. What do you mean? And I love to share that example because for me, what it really cemented is you always have to remember where people are coming from. And again, even if you have the most perfect comp plan and it makes sense, it's very simple, it's easy to articulate. Your managers can use it to drive and motivate performance. It will still fail if you don't think about the audience of the people that are receiving it. And for this group of people that we had acquired, they came from a world where there really was no governance, like there was no management of comp. And you bring them into a very tenured structure, and it's a complete shock to the system. And I think it's just a good reminder that it's not just remembering where people are coming from, but in the world that we work in, it's also very important to think about how do we best meet people where they're at. We're not always going to get what we want. We're not always going to get the most optimized, most cost efficient model. But I think the value of the work that we do is the partnerships that we build and how we work together. And sometimes that does mean compromising and negotiating, but that's part of what makes a good comp plan work is that we bring our perspective, we work with other people, and we try as best as possible to collate those together. But I just love to share that example because you always think about like, oh, you put somebody in a situation that you view as much more favorable to them. And I mean, in this case, we were giving them also a lot more money, but for them, it was a complete shock to the system, and they felt like totally taken off guard. So I'd love to share that example just as a reminder about like how important it is to always put ourselves in the other person's perspective.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, it is a great example because I've seen it firsthand when you have different sales leaders that come into an organization and kind of like do a shock to the system,
Mhm.
and you kind of get a sense of how people shift. But even people coming from one company to another and maybe making assumptions about what comp plans are going to look like, and then seeing that shock. But yeah, always take into account where the person or the team is coming from is a very, very good.
And research. We have to do our research too, right? It's very easy to say, oh, I know what this person is thinking, or I kind of know what the general sentiment is. Actually talk to people. I think that's the other undervalued part about our work is that we have an opportunity to talk with people and get, like feedback that is raw from the floor. And when you think about the value of the work that we can do, we can also ensure when we come and we talk with our CRO or CFO, we're bringing the perspective of every level of the organization. And you can help them see maybe what they're not seeing as well. And it's just, again, such a cool part about the world that we live in and the access that we have across our organizations that can be incredibly powerful when you think about it.
Yeah, 100%, 100%. So we wrap our shows with two questions every single time, and there's no exception. So we'd love to dig right in. So in the industry, is there anyone who you'd like to take out to lunch in particular, and why?
Maybe not necessarily like specifically in the sales comp industry, but I'm going to kind of broaden this a little bit to like business and anything and everything. But there's an incredible person named Peter Drucker. Are you familiar with him?
No.
So Peter Drucker is a huge author in terms of like the concept of like management and management philosophy. And he's just generated and written a lot of really incredible things that have also personally shaped the way that I think about management and leadership and just driving high performance and really good high quality teams. But he'd probably be one that I'd be very interested to pick his brain, sit down with lunch with him and understand like, what is high performance and like, what does it really look like? Like, what's the secret sauce to just having organic teams that operate at such a high level that it kind of operates on autopilot.
Yeah, that is a good one. I feel like the human psychology behind performance. I mean,
Oh yeah,
we're in this day to day trying to optimize behaviors. So 100% make for a very interesting lunch. And then is there a book, podcast, or a resource that's helped shape and kind of lead and help your career to date that you'd like to share with the audience?
oh yeah. One of my absolute favorites is Kim Scott's Radical Candor. I go back to this all the time. It's such a phenomenal framework to not just think about, you know, questioning and challenging the way that you approach the work that you do, but supporting the people that you lead and thinking about how to have the best high quality interactions. And I go back to something that I said earlier about the importance of really meeting people where they're at. And Radical Candor is such a phenomenal and practical way to approach that in the day-to-day work. And I think it's even more applicable in the sales comp world. There's a lot of emotions around compensation, and you're not always going to have the easiest conversations. But being very radically candid about the way that you approach how those conversations are and what your objective is, and making sure that you are truly caring about the people that you work with is incredibly pervasive. And it's something that I try to read it at least every couple of years. But it's such an incredible read. And if you haven't taken the time to read Radical Candor, even if you just take a couple snippets from Kim's work, it'll be revolutionary to the way that you think, especially if you're a people leader as well.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, building an entire like org, the company around it, let alone just within an org, I think is game changing. I mean, like that the transparency and kind of getting buy-in to the bigger objectives, and not having the fear and kind of tiptoeing around the feedback that you need to give in real time. It's a great framework. I agree.
Very powerful.
Yeah, 100%. Well, Kaleb, it's always a pleasure to chat, and I again just very thankful for leaders like you coming on and sharing your perspective and your feedback with the broader audience. Because I certainly agree. Back to the very beginning, what you said, 15 years ago when I started my career in sales comp, it certainly was not as much of a strategic lever. It's very rare to kind of see such senior leaders in an organization be head of sales comp, and now it's becoming more and more commonplace because it is a critical lever. And,
a great place to be. Yeah. Well, Nabeil, I appreciate you having me on, and thanks again for the opportunity.
Absolutely. Thank you.
The Sales Compensation Show is brought to you by Forma AI, the sales performance management platform that fully integrates sales planning with rapid, scalable incentive compensation management. Our data platform brings together how you can plan and manage the entire lifecycle of territories, quotas, and incentives. With global customers like Autodesk, Stryker, and Hootsuite, we enable go-to-market teams to plan and deploy even the most complex SPM strategies at speed, taking you from idea to execution instantly. To learn more about Forma AI, visit our website at forma.ai. Hit the subscribe button and find more episodes of the show on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and YouTube. Thanks for tuning in.